Part 1. Sharon Tate. Hollywood at the end of the 1960s believed it was entering a gentler future. The studios were loosening their grip. Young filmmakers were celebrated. Music, freedom, and rebellion blended into an illusion that violence belonged to the past. The phrase "summer of love" was not marketing. People believed it. Doors were left unlocked. Parties stretched into dawn. Fame felt harmless. High above Los Angeles, in the quiet curves of Benedict Canyon, stood a secluded home on Cielo Drive. Hidden by trees and distance, it symbolized everything Hollywood dreamed of becoming. Privacy. Beauty. Escape. Inside lived Sharon Tate, one of the most luminous faces of her generation. She was young, successful, and weeks away from becoming a mother. Her body carried life. Her future felt certain. Her husband, director Roman Polanski, was not there. Work had taken him overseas. Distance created a silence that night would later make unbearable. Sharon was not alone. With her were close friends, people she trusted, people who felt safe enough to relax in the hills above the city. Laughter. Casual conversation. The comfort of familiarity. Nothing suggested danger. Beyond the canyon, far from studio gates and premieres, another world existed. In the desert lived a man who saw chaos as destiny. Charles Manson was not powerful in the traditional sense. He had no money. No influence. No success. What he had was control over broken people searching for meaning. He fed them stories about the end of the world. He spoke of a coming collapse he called helter-skelter. In his mind, violence was not evil. It was a trigger. A spark meant to burn everything down. That night, he sent followers toward the house on the hill. They were not famous. They were not chosen because of who they were. They were chosen because they obeyed. They carried his words as truth. Their instructions were simple and terrifying. Leave no mercy. Make it unforgettable. The road to the house was dark. No neighbors. No witnesses. The first life lost that night belonged to a young man who happened to be in the wrong place. Stephen Parent had visited the caretaker. He was leaving. He never knew what he walked into. His death happened before the attackers even reached the front door. It was senseless. It set the tone for everything that followed. Inside the property, the telephone lines were cut. Isolation became complete. No help could be called. No warning sent. The house that once felt like a sanctuary became sealed off from the world. What happened next shattered the illusion that wealth and distance could protect anyone. The intruders entered through windows. They moved quietly at first. Confusion turned into terror. A man sleeping on the couch woke to a stranger standing over him. When he asked who they were, the response was theatrical, almost rehearsed. A line meant to sound powerful. A line meant to remove humanity from what followed. It was not about theft. It was not about anger. It was about belief twisted into action. The violence that followed was chaotic and overwhelming. Each victim was attacked with a level of force that suggested something deeper than rage. It was erasure. It was the destruction of symbols. Sharon Tate was not targeted because of her choices. She was targeted because of what she represented. Beauty. Success. Life continuing forward. As the others were silenced, Sharon remained. She had heard everything. She understood what was happening. She did not plead for herself. She pleaded for her unborn child. She asked for time. She offered anything she could. Her words were not dramatic. They were human. They were the sound of someone trying to protect life in a moment where mercy no longer existed. Her pleas were ignored. What happened next ended more than a life. It ended innocence. It ended the belief that monsters stayed hidden. After the silence, a final act was carried out. A word was written on the door using blood. It was not random. It was meant to confuse. To provoke. To point blame elsewhere. A signature of hate meant to turn violence into message. When morning came, Los Angeles woke to a nightmare. News spread quickly. Fear moved faster than facts. The reaction was immediate. Gates went up. Guards were hired. Weapons were purchased. Trust evaporated. The idea that Hollywood was a protected bubble died that day. The summer of love ended on a hillside. The media struggled to understand what had happened. How a pregnant actress, surrounded by comfort and success, could be taken so brutally. Attention shifted quickly from the victims to the men who ordered it. Charles Manson became infamous. His face appeared everywhere. Interviews. Magazine covers. Endless analysis. In death, Sharon Tate was nearly overshadowed by the myth of the men who never held the weapon. This created a lasting moral question. Who carries more guilt? The one who commands, or the one who acts? Manson did not enter the house. He did not strike the blows. Yet without him, nothing would have happened. His followers chose to obey. They chose to surrender their will. Responsibility fractured, but did not disappear. Another unsettling layer followed. Only a year earlier, Roman Polanski had released a film about a woman manipulated by a cult during pregnancy. The parallels disturbed the public. Some called it coincidence. Others whispered about dark forces invited through art. Grief mixed with superstition. Blame searched for a place to land. Sharon Tate became frozen in time. Forever young. Forever hopeful. Remembered as a victim more than a woman. Yet before that night, she was many things. A daughter. A friend. A wife. A future mother. Her life was not defined by how it ended, but by what was taken from her. Hollywood never fully recovered its innocence. Fame was no longer just a dream. It was a risk. The hills still hold their mansions. The lights still shine. But the belief that success brings safety vanished forever. As you reflect on this story, consider where responsibility truly begins and ends, and whether evil is more dangerous when it speaks softly or when it carries out the act itself. And if this account has unsettled you, stay with us, because the next chapter leaves the hills of Hollywood and steps onto a film set where a single moment of negligence changed cinema history forever. Part 2, Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee grew up carrying a name that already belonged to history. His father was a global icon, admired for discipline, philosophy, and physical mastery. From childhood, expectations followed him everywhere. He was expected to be strong. Expected to be exceptional. Expected to honor a legacy he did not choose. Every audition carried comparison. Every success was framed as inheritance rather than effort. By the early 1990s, Brandon was close to breaking free from that shadow. He had trained seriously. He had studied acting. He had endured rejection quietly. Then came The Crow. The role of Eric Draven was dark, emotional, and symbolic. A musician who returns from death to seek justice. The character was wounded, poetic, and intense. For Brandon, it was not just another job. It was a statement. A chance to be seen as himself. The atmosphere on the film set reflected the tone of the story. Long nights. Rain machines. Dim lighting. Exhausted crews racing against deadlines. From the beginning, the production felt tense. Accidents happened early. A worker was injured. Equipment malfunctioned. Weather damaged sets. People whispered that the project felt cursed. Most brushed it off as stress and coincidence. Behind the camera, corners were being cut. Budgets tightened. Schedules compressed. Safety protocols that existed on paper were ignored in practice. The prop department faced pressure to move fast. When they needed dummy rounds for close-up shots, they chose convenience over caution. Instead of factory-made safe rounds, they altered live ammunition by hand. Powder removed. Bullets reseated. A shortcut that saved time but introduced danger. One mistake went unnoticed. A primer remained active. During an earlier setup, that primer discharged just enough force to push a bullet into the barrel of a revolver. The gun was not properly checked afterward. The obstruction stayed hidden. Invisible. Waiting. The night of the fatal scene arrived near the end of filming. Fatigue was heavy. Focus was slipping. Brandon prepared to perform a moment where his character is shot. The weapon was presented as safe. Blanks only. No projectile. No risk. Trust replaced verification. The camera rolled. A fellow actor raised the revolver. The trigger was pulled. The sound echoed. Brandon reacted and fell. Crew members watched, impressed by his realism. They assumed he was acting. Seconds passed. Then silence. He did not rise. Confusion spread. Someone approached. Blood was visible. The mood shifted instantly. Panic replaced routine. Emergency services were called. Brandon was rushed to the hospital. Surgeons worked for hours, attempting to repair catastrophic internal damage. His body fought, but the injury was too severe. His fiancée waited nearby. Wedding plans had already been made. Their future felt tangible. With every passing hour, hope weakened. Eventually, doctors confirmed what no one wanted to accept. Brandon Lee was gone. He was in his 20s. His career was just beginning. The shock rippled outward. The cast was devastated. Crew members were consumed by guilt. One person carried a particularly heavy burden. The actor who pulled the trigger had followed instructions. He had not loaded the weapon. Yet he lived with the knowledge that his action ended a life. No charges were filed. Still, the psychological weight remained. Investigations revealed a chain of negligence rather than malice. No conspiracy. No intention. Just poor decisions stacked on top of each other. Untrained handling. Lack of oversight. Failure to inspect. A system that valued speed over safety. The studio faced a choice. Shut everything down. Or finish the film. Digital technology was used to complete remaining scenes. Body doubles. Visual effects. The movie was released with a dedication. Audiences embraced it. Some viewed it as tribute. Others saw exploitation. Debate followed. Was honoring a performance worth reopening wounds? The tragedy forced changes across the industry. Firearms procedures were rewritten. Inspections became mandatory. The death of Brandon Lee became a case study taught to new generations of filmmakers. His loss was not meaningless. It changed how sets operated. At least for a time. Still, whispers persisted. His father had also died young. Roles involving violence. Stories that mirrored reality. The idea of a family curse took root in popular culture. Rational explanations struggled against emotional coincidence. Humans search for patterns when loss feels unbearable. Brandon Lee wanted to be remembered for his work, not his ending. He wanted to build something his own. Instead, his name became a warning. A reminder that a prop is never just a prop. That safety is not optional. That one careless moment can erase decades of potential. As this story settles, it invites reflection on accountability and whether negligence should ever be treated as an accident without consequence. And as we move forward, the next chapter shifts from the controlled chaos of a film set to a quiet bedroom, where danger came not from equipment, but from someone trusted most. Part 3, Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman was known as one of the safest men in Hollywood. Gentle. Reliable. Kind. He was the person everyone trusted. The men who showed up on time. The men who never caused problems. The men who made other people shine. On screen, he played confident voices and sharp characters. Off screen, he avoided conflict and chaos. His career was thriving. Saturday Night Live made him indispensable. The Simpsons turned his voice into a permanent part of popular culture. He was respected, admired, and financially secure. While others chased excess, Phil lived quietly. He drove a family car. He went home early. He chose stability over spectacle. Behind closed doors, his life looked very different. His marriage was fragile. His wife struggled with insecurity and resentment. She lived beside him and celebrated by millions while she felt invisible. Success amplified the imbalance between them. Fame became a mirror reflecting her fear of being left behind. Substance abuse returned slowly, then violently. What had once been controlled resurfaced with intensity. Mood swings followed. Paranoia grew. Medication mixed poorly with alcohol. The household atmosphere shifted from tense to unpredictable. Friends noticed the change. Some worried. Few intervened. Phil believed in patience. He believed problems could be managed with calm. He believed staying was better than leaving. He stayed for the children. He stayed because he thought loyalty could heal instability. He stayed because walking away felt like failure. On the final night, there was an argument. Nothing unusual by their standards. Raised voices. Accusations. Emotional exhaustion. Phil did not escalate. He did what he always did. He disengaged. He went to bed believing the morning would bring clarity. Believing sleep would reset the world. He never woke up. While the house was silent, his wife entered the bedroom. What followed happened without warning. Without witnesses. Without resistance. Phil was asleep. He had no chance to defend himself. The man known for making people laugh was gone in seconds. Their children were in the house. Sleeping. Unaware. Protected only by walls and distance. By morning, they would wake without parents. Their lives would fracture permanently before they could understand why. Afterward, his wife went to a friend. She spoke words that sounded unreal. A confession delivered with confusion and despair. At first, the friend did not believe her. Then the truth became unavoidable. Police were called. Too late to change anything. Back at the house, she returned to the bedroom. Alone. Sirens approached. What happened next ended any possibility of explanation. 2 lives were lost in one night. The home became a crime scene. The marriage ended in silence. News spread quickly. Shock replaced disbelief. No one expected this ending. Phil Hartman did not fit the narrative of danger. He was not reckless. He was not volatile. He was not aggressive. His death forced uncomfortable questions about where violence hides. The entertainment industry mourned. Colleagues struggled to reconcile the image of the gentle professional with the reality of his private life. Characters he voiced were retired. Silence replaced laughter. A gap opened that could not be filled. The psychological impact extended outward. Friends questioned what signs they missed. Co-workers wondered if kindness had blinded them. Audiences felt betrayed by the idea that safety could be an illusion. The idea that danger can come from the closest place possible. This case challenged assumptions about domestic violence. It revealed how male victims are often overlooked. How quiet endurance is mistaken for strength. How staying is praised even when leaving might be survival. Phil did not fight back. He did not raise alarms. He trusted peace would return. His children were raised away from the spotlight. Protected as much as possible. Yet no protection erases memory. No distance removes loss. The consequences of that night extended across generations. Phil Hartman left behind a legacy defined by generosity and talent. But his ending reframed his story. It exposed how vulnerability can exist beneath success. How kindness can become a risk. How silence can be deadly. As this chapter closes, it asks whether society listens closely enough when men suffer behind smiles, and whether our definitions of strength need to change. And as you consider that question, the next part moves to a young actress whose life was taken not by someone she loved, but by someone who believed he owned her from a distance. Part 4, Rebecca Schaeffer. Rebecca Schaeffer represented a promise Hollywood loved to protect. Young. Polite. Approachable. Her smile felt familiar rather than distant. Casting directors saw reliability. Audiences saw innocence. She was building momentum quietly, without scandal, without controversy. Success felt close but not dangerous. Her apartment reflected that belief. A modest place in a calm neighborhood. A door she answered herself. A routine that suggested normal life still existed behind television fame. Privacy felt intact. Safety felt assumed. Far away, someone else was constructing a different story. A young man who did not see Rebecca as a performer, but as a character written for him alone. He did not admire her work. He studied her image. He confused access with permission. Attention with ownership. Letters became the bridge. He wrote. She replied once, politely, kindly, without understanding how meaning could be distorted. A signed photo. A simple gesture. To a healthy mind, nothing more. To an unstable one, confirmation. The fantasy deepened. He watched her roles closely. When she appeared in a film scene that challenged the image he had created, anger replaced devotion. The person he imagined no longer existed. He felt betrayed by a stranger who had never made a promise. What followed exposed a dangerous flaw in the system meant to protect citizens. Personal information was not guarded. Home addresses could be obtained through official channels. With minimal effort and a small fee, a private investigator accessed her location through motor vehicle records. The state provided the map. The morning arrived quietly. Sunlight. Normal sounds. Rebecca was preparing for an audition that could change her career. She expected a delivery. A script. Opportunity. Instead, the doorbell rang with something else waiting behind it. The first encounter was brief. A familiar face from letters stood there. He showed her the photograph. She remained calm. She asked him to leave. She closed the door believing the situation was resolved. Courtesy had always worked before. He went away. He ate breakfast nearby. He sat with his thoughts. The fantasy collapsed completely. Rejection hardened into purpose. He returned. The second knock ended everything. Rebecca opened the door again, expecting closure. What happened next occurred in seconds. The boundary between public admiration and private danger vanished. She fell inside the threshold of her own home. As she lay there, she asked a question that echoed across the city. Why? It was not accusation. It was confusion. A search for logic where none existed. She was rushed to the hospital. Doctors worked quickly. The damage was too severe. Rebecca Schaefer was gone before the day fully began. She was in her early 20s. Her career unfinished. Her life interrupted at the doorway she trusted. Hollywood reacted with shock and anger. Fear spread differently this time. Not from distant hills or unknown intruders, but from mailboxes, fan letters, and open doors. Actors reassessed their routines. Studios reassessed responsibility. The idea of fame shifted again. The trial followed. Evidence was clear. Intent undeniable. The sentence removed the attacker from society permanently. Justice arrived, but relief did not. The loss remained irreversible. What changed was the law. The system that allowed her address to be sold was dismantled. Privacy protections were rewritten. Access to personal records became restricted. For the first time, persistent unwanted pursuit was named, defined, and criminalized. Stalking became a recognized threat, not an inconvenience. Rebecca's death forced acknowledgement that obsession is not admiration, and proximity is not affection. The legal landscape shifted because her life ended. Her legacy extended beyond film credits. It reshaped how society understands boundaries. How kindness can be misread. How safety requires structure, not assumptions. Rebecca Schaefer did not die because she was careless. She died because systems failed to protect her. Because politeness was mistaken for permission. Because fame invited access without accountability. Her story remains a warning written into law. Privacy is not a luxury. It is a safeguard. And sometimes, it is purchased with unbearable cost. As you reflect on this chapter, consider how often society dismisses warning signs until they turn irreversible, and whether courtesy should ever outweigh caution. Next, the story moves from a quiet doorway to dark water, where unanswered questions surround the final hours of a Hollywood icon lost at sea. Part 5, Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood belonged to Hollywood before she understood what fame meant. She grew up under studio lights, learning lines while other children learned games. Audiences watched her mature from a bright-eyed child into one of the most admired actresses of her generation. Her face carried warmth and vulnerability. Her career seemed protected by destiny itself. Behind that image lived a private fear. Natalie was deeply afraid of dark water. It was not a rumor or a quirk. Friends knew it. She spoke about it openly. Pools at night unsettled her. Open ocean terrified her. It was a fear that followed her for decades, quietly shaping her behavior. The weekend trip was meant to be simple. A short escape aboard a yacht near Catalina Island. A break from schedules and noise. With her were her husband, a successful television star, and a fellow actor who was working with her on an upcoming film. A captain completed the small group. Limited space. Limited privacy. Emotions had nowhere to hide. From the start, tension was present. Alcohol flowed freely. Conversations sharpened. Glances lingered too long. Natalie and her co-star shared a connection that felt professional but intimate enough to provoke discomfort. Her husband noticed. Jealousy took shape slowly, then all at once. As night settled, the mood worsened. Voices rose inside the cabin. Anger replaced restraint. Objects were struck. Words were said that could not be taken back. The captain later described the atmosphere as hostile and volatile. It was no longer a peaceful retreat. It was a confined storm. At some point, Natalie was alone. Whether she left the cabin or was pushed toward the deck remains unclear. What is known is that she was no longer visible. The sea was dark. The night was cold. The yacht drifted while something went terribly wrong. Hours passed before authorities were notified. That delay became one of the most troubling elements of the case. A missing person in open water is an emergency. Yet the call for help came late. Explanations varied. Assumptions were made. Time slipped away. By morning, the search ended with discovery. Natalie Wood was found in the water near the yacht. She was wearing night clothes and a heavy jacket that absorbed water. It weighed her down. The image shocked the public. The actress who feared dark water had been claimed by it. Initial examinations labeled the incident an accident. The narrative suggested she went onto the deck alone to adjust a small boat that was making noise. She slipped. She fell. The sea did the rest. It was simple. Too simple. Details complicated the story. Bruising was noted. Marks that suggested contact before entering the water. A scratch on her face. Injuries that raised questions rather than closed them. At the time, they were dismissed as incidental. Decades later, the case was reopened. Medical examiners reviewed evidence with modern perspective. The cause of death was revised. No longer a clear accident. Now it included undetermined factors. Language shifted. Certainty vanished. The captain eventually spoke more openly. He described hearing arguments that night. He described anger. He described fear. He claimed he was instructed not to speak to authorities beyond basic answers. Silence had been part of the agreement. The co-star maintained distance. He avoided speculation. He offered condolences without detail. His restraint protected him but deepened public suspicion. Witnesses rarely forget what they hear, even when they refuse to speak. Natalie's husband became central to renewed investigation. His timeline changed across interviews. His assumptions about her disappearance strained belief. Authorities eventually named him a person of interest. No charges followed. Evidence had aged. Time had eroded clarity. Public opinion divided sharply. Some believed the tragedy was a horrible accident fueled by alcohol and misjudgment. Others believed fear drove Natalie away from confrontation, possibly toward escape. A few believed force played a role. The truth rested somewhere beyond reach. Justice delayed rarely feels like justice delivered. The absence of resolution left a wound open. Natalie would remain suspended between legend and question mark. Her work lived on. Her ending did not settle. She was more than a mystery. She was an artist whose performances carried emotion shaped by real vulnerability. Her life held contradictions. Strength and fear. Fame and fragility. Control and helplessness. The sea keeps secrets well. The night erases sound. What happened on that yacht may never be fully known. What remains is discomfort. The sense that something essential slipped through the cracks of time and power. Natalie would fear dark water her entire life, and that fear followed her into history, leaving behind a question that refuses to rest. After hearing this story, consider which detail troubles you most, and whether uncertainty itself can ever feel like an answer. Next, the journey moves from open water to a concert hall, where kindness met obsession and a young voice was silenced in front of those who adored her. Part 6, Christina Grimmie. Christina Grimmie rose without a machine behind her. No studio grooming. No industry protection. She built her voice in a bedroom, in front of a camera, singing to people she could not see. The internet rewarded honesty. Her performances felt personal. Fans did not just listen. They felt included. That closeness became her identity. Christina spoke directly to viewers. She smiled at usernames. She thanked people by name. Fame did not distance her. It pulled her closer to strangers. She believed connection was the point. Her transition from online creator to mainstream artist felt natural. Television exposure expanded her reach, but her habits did not change. She stayed accessible. She stayed warm. She stayed open. After shows, she met people face to face. She signed autographs herself. She hugged fans. There was no barrier. No separation. Somewhere else, a different story was forming. A man watched her videos repeatedly. Not as entertainment, but as confirmation. He did not see a performer. He saw a future partner. Every smile became a signal. Every lyric became a message meant for him. In his mind, effort equaled entitlement. He reshaped himself to match the fantasy. Changed his appearance. Changed his habits. Changed his identity. He believed transformation earned reward. When reality contradicted that belief, frustration turned inward, then outward. The fantasy did not break. It hardened. He planned a journey that had no return. He packed belongings with intention. He carried tools meant to end something, not begin it. He traveled toward the place where Christina would be most vulnerable. Not on stage. Not protected by distance. But after the music stopped. The venue was small. Intimate. The atmosphere felt safe. Parents stood beside teenagers. Merchandise tables replaced security lines. Christina finished performing and stayed behind to meet people. She was tired, but grateful. This was how she connected. This was how she gave back. When the line moved forward, nothing felt unusual. Faces blurred together. Smiles repeated. Then he stepped forward. To Christina, he looked like another supporter. Another person who had waited patiently. She recognized none of the danger written inside him. Her instinct was kindness. She opened her arms. The gesture was automatic. Familiar. It was the same gesture she had given hundreds of times before. In that brief moment, the space between them disappeared. What followed happened too fast to stop. A loud sound shattered the room. Christina fell. Shock froze everyone present. Confusion spread before understanding arrived. The atmosphere of celebration collapsed instantly into panic. Her brother was beside her. He did not hesitate. He moved toward the threat. He acted on instinct. He tackled the attacker, forcing the situation to end before more people were hurt. In the struggle, the attacker turned the harm inward. The danger ended, but the damage was already done. Christina was rushed to the hospital. Medical staff worked urgently. Family gathered. Friends waited. Hope flickered briefly, then faded. Christina Grimmie did not survive. She was young. Her career was still unfolding. Her life ended in the same openness that defined it. The city was already grieving another tragedy that same weekend. Headlines overlapped. One loss swallowed by another. Yet for her family and her fans, the pain was singular. Irreplaceable. Questions followed quickly. How did someone enter the venue with weapons unnoticed? Why were there no metal detectors? Why was personal access prioritized over protection? The answers pointed to gaps in security that were common at the time. Safety was considered optional until it failed. Beyond logistics, deeper questions emerged. The relationship between creators and audiences had changed. Social media blurred boundaries. Fans felt closer than ever. Creators felt obligated to reciprocate. The line between supporter and stranger weakened. Christina believed in community. She believed kindness mattered. She believed meeting people where they were created loyalty and trust. None of that was wrong. Yet her story exposed how easily warmth can be exploited by someone who confuses attention with ownership. Her brother lived on carrying both pride and trauma. He was called a hero. He was also a witness. Those two realities do not cancel each other. They coexist. Christina's legacy shifted. Not just as a singer, but as a reminder. Love from a distance must remain a distance. Accessibility requires structure. Safety must never depend on good intentions alone. She left behind music that still carries her voice. Songs filled with sincerity. Performances untouched by irony. Her final image remains haunting. Arms open. Trust extended. A symbol of generosity in a world that did not protect it. Christina Grimmie did not fail to protect herself. Systems failed to protect her. Culture failed to adapt fast enough. Her kindness did not cause her death, but it shaped the moment in which it happened. As this chapter settles, consider whether closeness in the digital age needs new boundaries, and where responsibility lies when connection turns dangerous. Next, the story travels back to an era of glamour and illusion, where jealousy and possession destroyed a rising star inside a private apartment far from the public eye. Part 7, Dorothy Stratten. Dorothy Stratten entered Hollywood carrying the optimism of someone who had not yet learned how dangerous admiration could be. She was young, gentle, and visibly unprepared for the machinery that surrounded her. When she stepped into the Playboy world, it felt like opportunity rather than risk. Cameras loved her face. Executives praised her innocence. Attention arrived faster than understanding. At her side stood a man who presented himself as protector and guide. He was her husband and her manager. He framed his role as essential. Without him, he claimed, she would be lost. That belief became the foundation of control. He handled meetings. He spoke for her. He positioned himself as the architect of her success. As her visibility grew, the imbalance deepened. Invitations arrived that did not include him. People spoke to her directly. She began to see beyond the narrow path laid out for her. The admiration once shared between them shifted. Praise flowed toward her alone. His presence became unnecessary. His authority weakened. Dorothy's confidence grew quietly. She started to understand that her value did not belong to anyone else. She explored new relationships. She listened to people who treated her as a person rather than a project. A future outside his reach became imaginable. That shift triggered fear. Not concern. Possession. To him, Dorothy was not an individual making choices. She was proof of his relevance. Her independence felt like theft. Her happiness felt like betrayal. Control that once felt normal turned desperate. Plans for separation emerged. Divorce was discussed. Legal boundaries were forming. Dorothy believed resolution could be handled with calm and fairness. She agreed to one final meeting. A conversation meant to close a chapter. She arrived expecting paperwork and closure. The apartment felt familiar. Too familiar. Privacy created vulnerability. The conversation did not move toward resolution. It turned inward. Power was reasserted through intimidation. Consent disappeared under pressure. What followed was not misunderstanding. It was domination expressed as entitlement. The violence that ended her life was deliberate. It was not chaos. It was finality. The act focused not only on ending her existence, but on destroying what he believed belonged to him. Her face, the source of admiration, was targeted with intent. Afterward, boundaries dissolved completely. Time passed in a space where reality no longer applied. The presence of her body did not bring remorse. It fueled fixation. Control extended beyond life itself. Investigators later described behavior that reflected obsession stripped of humanity. Eventually, the men turned the violence inward. The story ended in silence. 2 lives lost in one enclosed space. One through rising possibility. The other through collapsing ego. Public reaction followed swiftly. Shock mingled with judgment. Headlines reduced complexity to tragedy. Dorothy became a symbol before she was mourned as a person. Her youth and kindness were highlighted. Her fear was often ignored. Attention shifted to the system that surrounded her. Playboy had elevated her image while claiming distance from her fate. Critics questioned whether the environment commodified innocence and blurred boundaries between empowerment and exploitation. Others argued responsibility ended with individual choice. Her image continued to circulate. Magazines sold. Posters printed. Fame outlived life. The body of work expanded even after the body itself was gone. For some, this honored her. For others, it extended the exploitation she never fully escaped. Films were made. Books written. Interpretations layered over her memory. Some portrayed her as naive. Others as ambitious. Rarely was she allowed complexity. Rarely was the focus placed squarely on the mindset that equated creation with ownership. At the center of the story remains a question that refuses to settle. When a man claims he discovered a woman, does that give him authority over her future? Does assistance create debt? Does opportunity grant control? The answer should be simple. History suggests it is not. Dorothy Stratton did not lose her life because of fame alone. She lost it because someone believed gratitude was permanent and autonomy was betrayal. Because a system praised beauty without protecting the person behind it. Because possession was mistaken for love. Her story exposes a pattern repeated across industries and decades. When men position themselves as makers, they often believe they are owed loyalty forever. When women step beyond that frame, the response can turn destructive. Dorothy's legacy should not be limited to how she died. It should include the warning her story carries. Success does not require surrender. Guidance does not justify control. Admiration does not equal ownership. She was not a creation. She was a person who began to see herself clearly just as someone else refused to let go. As this chapter closes, reflect on where society draws the line between support and control, and whether we challenge that line loudly enough when it begins to blur. Next, the story moves from a private apartment to a quiet desert city, where a wholesome television star lived a hidden life that ended in one of Hollywood's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. Part 8, Bob Crane. Bob Crane was introduced to America as comfort. A smiling face. A reliable presence. On television, he played a clever leader who outwitted enemies with charm and intelligence. Families welcomed him into their living rooms week after week. He felt safe. Familiar. Trustworthy. The image stuck. Away from cameras, another life unfolded quietly. Fame brought access. Access fed appetite. Bob Crane developed a fixation that went beyond desire. He became obsessed with documenting intimacy. Not for art. Not for memory. For control. For replay. For proof of power. Technology became part of the addiction. Cameras were not tools. They were extensions of compulsion. This secret life required assistance. Enter a man who admired Crane not as a performer, but as a gateway. A technician who sold video equipment. A hanger-on who thrived in the shadow of celebrity. Together, they formed a closed circuit. One provided fame. The other provided tools. Each validated the worst instincts of the other. For years, the arrangement functioned. Travel. Encounters. Recording. No consequences that could not be explained away. But addictions do not stabilize. They escalate. Crane began to feel exposed. Vulnerable. His career slowed. His marriages collapsed. He spoke about wanting change. He spoke about ending the partnership that enabled his descent. That decision cracked the dynamic. The men who lived through Crane felt abandoned. Access threatened. Identity at risk. What had been mutual indulgence turned into resentment. Dependency turned into rage. The separation was not clean. Emotions lingered unresolved. Crane was performing in a dinner theater production in a quiet desert city. A temporary routine. A modest stage. A private apartment. He returned there after a show one night. He expected rest. Instead, something followed him inside. The next morning, he was found lifeless in his bed. There were no signs of struggle. He had been asleep. The attack came from close proximity. Trust was implied. The weapon was never officially recovered. Investigators believed it was part of the same equipment that defined his secret life. A heavy object. Something familiar. Something symbolic. Initial police work lacked urgency. Evidence handling was flawed. Scenes were contaminated. Assumptions replaced thoroughness. Attention drifted quickly from murder to scandal. Headlines focused on tapes rather than death. Public judgment shifted away from sympathy. Suspicion centered on the companion. His connection was obvious. Motive was plausible. His car contained traces that suggested presence. But forensic science at the time lacked precision. What felt convincing could not be proven. He walked free. Years passed. Advances in investigation reopened the case. Charges were filed. A trial followed. Prosecutors presented circumstantial threads. The defense dismantled certainty. Evidence had aged. Procedures had failed. Doubt filled the gaps. The verdict delivered closure without resolution. Acquittal did not equal innocence. It marked the end of legal pursuit, not the end of questions. The suspect maintained denial until death. The truth remained inaccessible. Bob Crane became a paradox. A beloved figure remembered for laughter. A man reduced to scandal after death. The crime never officially solved. The victim judged as harshly as the suspect. Moral scrutiny replaced mourning. The public struggled with contradiction. Could someone so cheerful live so recklessly? Could a private flaw justify diminished empathy? The answer should be no. Yet history often treats victims differently when secrets emerge. This case forces reflection on fairness. Does personal behavior determine the value of a life? Does scandal excuse poor investigation? Does exposure replace justice? Bob Crane was not innocent of everything, but he was innocent of his own ending. His legacy remains fractured. Television reruns carry nostalgia shadowed by unease. Viewers laugh while knowing what came later. The contrast is uncomfortable. It should be. The story of Bob Crane is not just about a hidden life. It is about how quickly society turns away when a victim complicates the narrative. How justice falters when judgment takes its place. As you consider this case, think about whether our reaction to a victim's flaws changes how much truth we demand on their behalf. Next, the story moves to a quiet driveway where a young actress tried to leave an abusive relationship and paid for that decision with her life. Part 9, Dominique Dunne. Dominique Dunne was standing at the edge of a breakthrough. Auditions were landing. Roles were visible. Her face was becoming familiar to audiences. Momentum felt real. She was young, focused, and finally stepping into a future she had worked for quietly. Behind that progress existed a relationship defined by control. Her partner monitored her movements, questioned her choices, and blurred affection with dominance. Friends noticed tension. Family sensed unease. Small incidents accumulated into a pattern that felt increasingly dangerous. There were warning signs long before the final night. Arguments that escalated too quickly. Emotional pressure framed as love. Moments of fear followed by apologies. The cycle repeated. Dominique tried to manage it privately, believing distance and time could correct behavior that felt unstable. Eventually, she made a decision that many victims struggle to reach. She ended the relationship. She changed her routines. She tried to reclaim space. Leaving was not dramatic. It was firm. It was necessary. She believed separation would restore safety. For her former partner, the breakup represented loss of authority. Not heartbreak. Power. Control removed exposed insecurity. Rejection became humiliation. The idea that she could choose life without him felt unacceptable. The night everything ended appeared ordinary. Dominique was at home rehearsing lines with a colleague. Work felt grounding. Familiar. She was building something new. When her former partner arrived uninvited, she chose caution over confrontation. She stepped outside to speak with him, hoping to prevent a scene. The conversation moved quickly from words to force. The boundary she tried to maintain collapsed. What followed required sustained intent, not impulse. Time passed while breath was restricted. The act was prolonged. Consciousness faded. Control was absolute. Inside the house, a witness heard sounds of distress. Fear froze him. Uncertainty paralyzed response. He did not intervene immediately. The moment slipped beyond recovery. Dominique was found unconscious. Emergency responders acted quickly. She was taken to the hospital. Machines replaced breath. Days passed in silence. Hope narrowed. Doctors confirmed irreversible damage. Her family faced a decision no parent should confront. Life support was withdrawn. Dominique Dunne was gone. Public reaction was swift and emotional. Headlines emphasized her youth and promise. Sympathy poured in. Then came the trial. That process transformed grief into outrage. The defense framed the act as emotional loss of control. Language minimized duration and intent. Past incidents of violence were excluded. The narrative shifted focus from sustained harm to temporary emotion. The jury was never shown the full pattern. The verdict reflected that framing. Conviction did not match severity. The sentence was brief. Shockingly brief. A life ended received a punishment that felt symbolic rather than consequential. Anger followed. Not just from the public, but from a father who refused silence. Dominique's father transformed grief into purpose. He documented the process. He wrote. He spoke. He ensured the details were remembered. He pursued accountability through words when law failed. His work changed him. He became a chronicler of injustice. A voice for victims ignored by systems designed to protect them. His activism forced uncomfortable conversations about how courts treat intimate partner violence. The case exposed a legal concept that many questioned. The idea that intense emotion reduces responsibility. That prolonged harm can be reframed as momentary loss of control. That passion excuses severity. For many, the concept felt outdated and dangerous. Dominique's story highlighted the risk that follows leaving an abusive partner. Separation often increases danger rather than reducing it. Control challenged can trigger escalation. Safety plans require support that is often unavailable. Her legacy remains painful and instructive. She did what society tells victims to do. She left. She sought normalcy. She protected others by stepping outside. That courage did not save her. The question lingers. How many warnings are enough? How much time qualifies as intent? How justice measures loss? Dominique Dunne's life did not end because she stayed. It ended because she tried to leave. As you consider this chapter, reflect on whether laws truly understand the realities of abuse and whether accountability should ever soften when control turns violent. Next, the story moves to a bedroom in the golden age of Hollywood, where the death of a man known as an invincible hero remains surrounded by unanswered questions. Part 10. George Reeves. George Reeves carried a symbol heavier than any costume. To millions of children, he was invincible. The face that smiled through danger. The man who stood for justice and certainty. On screen, nothing could harm him. Off screen, that identity became a cage. The role that made him famous also trapped him. Casting directors stopped seeing an actor. They saw a cape. Serious roles vanished. Offers thinned. Pride eroded quietly. He wanted respect, not nostalgia. He wanted to move forward, not repeat the same image forever. His personal life reflected that tension. He moved within circles of wealth and influence, where favors mattered and silence was currency. Relationships formed that carried imbalance. Power hovered in the background. Choices felt limited. Independence felt expensive. On the night everything ended, guests filled his home. Laughter mixed with alcohol. Conversations drifted late. The mood was loose but unstable. At some point, George went upstairs to his bedroom. Words were spoken downstairs that would later disturb anyone who heard them. A single sound followed. Sharp. Final. When people ran upstairs, they found George Reeves lifeless on the bed. A firearm nearby. The scene looked simple to those who wanted it closed quickly. The official response moved fast. Too fast. Authorities labeled the death self-inflicted before critical questions were explored. Evidence collection lacked patience. Conclusions arrived ahead of clarity. The file was stamped and shelved. Details did not align neatly. The firearm carried no fingerprints. Not even his. Additional marks were found in the room that suggested earlier discharges. Explanations were offered casually. Practice shots. Old damage. Nothing pursued deeply. The behavior of his partner that night raised eyebrows. Statements about what would happen before it happened. A delay before seeking help. Calm where panic would be expected. Each detail alone seemed dismissible. Together, they formed a pattern that refused comfort. George Reeves's mother rejected the official story immediately. She knew her son's state of mind. She knew his plans. She knew he was frustrated but not hopeless. She hired a private investigator to pursue answers the system ignored. That effort did not last. Progress stopped abruptly. Pressure was implied. Access vanished. The investigation ended without resolution. Doors closed quietly. Over time, rumors grew. Whispers of influence. Claims of jealousy. Stories of a powerful woman whose anger carried reach. Decades later, a deathbed confession was rumored. Nothing documented. Nothing admissible. Just another thread left hanging. The truth became something people argued about rather than something to uncover. Some accepted the official version as tragic but straightforward. Others saw too many inconsistencies to ignore. Without definitive proof, certainty remained impossible. George Reeves faded into myth. The man who played an immortal hero died under circumstances that made him seem painfully human. Vulnerable. Expendable. Forgotten once inconvenient. This case exposed a familiar Hollywood pattern. When power feels threatened, narratives tighten. When reputations risk damage, answers simplify. Justice slows or stops entirely. The questions persist because they were never addressed properly. How does a scene lack basic physical confirmation? Why rush a conclusion that leaves contradictions untouched? Who benefits from closure without truth? George Reeves deserved more than speculation. He deserved a thorough search for answers, not a convenient ending. His life was more complex than a costume. His death deserved complexity as well. The Superman image promised protection. The reality offered none. Fame amplified visibility but reduced safety. The higher the pedestal, the faster the fall when support disappears. Time passed. Witnesses aged. Evidence degraded. The opportunity for certainty slipped away. All that remained were questions and the uncomfortable sense that something important was buried too quickly. George Reeves stood for justice on screen. In life, justice never reached him. His story closes the series not with resolution, but with a reminder of how power shapes outcomes long after headlines fade. Consider which detail in this story feels hardest to dismiss, and whether unanswered questions demand discussion rather than silence. And after this final chapter, stay with the larger reflection on how fame turns protection into illusion, and how every story in this series connects to that fragile truth.